I think we are good. So what's the main agenda for today? It's pretty basic. The main thing that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking about the ZoomCharts visuals and how they could be used within the report. Because this is one of the first challenges where you probably all already noticed as well. We made an exclamation that we want to see you guys use as much of ZoomCharts visuals as possible, wherever it's applicable. Of course, not cards, because we don't have card visuals. So of course, use native visuals for that, or other visuals. Really depends on what you're building there. But based on the feedback forums that we have sent out, one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of you want to hear more about the use cases for our visuals. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're going to be talking about different visuals, different use cases, what are some tips and tricks regarding them, how to create them, how to customize them, and so forth. Also, what our team did, let's see where it was. Let me just share the screen, get the right one. I'm going to leave it in the hands of Sabina to paste in the correct URL, because I hope this one is the right one, but you know, better safe than sorry. So we also created a little cheat sheet for you. The main reason why we're doing this is because our names are a little bit different than the traditional Power BI visuals. So we created a little cheat sheet where you can simply see, for example, if you were using an area chart or let's say a clustered column chart, that you can actually replace it with a combo visual. If you were using, for example, cluster bar chart, you can replace it with a combo bar chart and so forth. So what visuals can be replaced with other visuals? This is the main idea about this, so that you have a resource that you can quickly take a look at it and see, okay, if I'm using this, what I could use instead of it. Like, for example, if you're using categorical data and you had columns, lines, or areas, probably combo or a combo bar is going to be the choice you want to go for. If you were looking at date and or time, the reason why we're specifically saying and or is because the visual supports dates and time hierarchies. So in those cases, use the timeline or the time series, so forth. So this is a resource, again, that you can download. You can save it as a URL, just access it whenever it's needed, but it's there to help you guys out. So thanks to the team for creating this. I think it's going to be very beneficial for every participant, especially for the new ones. This is going to be a lifesaver. Trust me. Because, for example, even if you look at it right now, right? If you look at one of the visuals, the drill down combo pro, for example, you can see that the same visual is actually being able to replicate all of these visuals. So column charts, areas, stacked areas, line charts, stacked columns, clustered columns, 100% stacked, different variations of them, combinations of them. So there's just a bunch of different visuals that one combo chart can actually replace. Without knowing this, you might first look at it and be like, it kind of looks like it, but I don't really find it how to customize this, right? So this is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the customization of the visuals and how to achieve different things and how to get even more from them. So the combo chart, for example, is actually capable of creating more than 100 unique different setups for different chart types. So lines, columns, lines, columns, and areas, and any combination between these three different chart types. Stacks, clusters, clusters and stacks, multiple stacks, there's just a bunch of them. So yeah, I hope this cheat sheet helps for you guys. And because we're giving this to you, now I'm expecting even better reports. I can't let you off so easily, right? I have to raise up the bar and say, hey, I want to get more from you guys. I want to see more. I want to see more interesting things. But at the end of the day, do whatever feels comfortable to you. If you don't want to go too much into the customization and just create a simple report that's efficient and effective, keep it that way. You don't have to create 50 different series, customize them, create stacks and clusters. No, if you can tell a story with simple charts, with the drill down approach and everything, you don't have to make it overly complicated. Just make it interesting, enjoyable, and actually efficient. So it tells a story with the data, so you can find the answers that you're looking for. This is for those of you who want to go, take the next step, let's say it like that. All right. Enough babbling. Let's see what the visuals are capable of and what we can do with them. So I think we're going to actually go in similar manner to how they're placed in the cheat sheet. So we're going to start off with the combo and combo bar. So the difference between these two visuals is the orientation. That is the one main difference that these two have. It's the similar approach to how Power BI does it as well for the native visuals. You see you have clustered bar chart, you have a clustered column chart. The reason why it's better to split them, because there are different properties taken into account. In one case, you're sizing the x-axis because it's category, so it's textual axis. In the other one, it's numerical axis. So there's a lot of different algorithms taken into place to calculate the space and positioning and placement of things. So it's better to split them in half. So if you're looking with columns or lines and areas, then you want to go with the combo. If you're looking at bars and lines or areas, then it's going to be the combo bar. Now, how does the visual actually work? It's actually quite simple. So what we're going to do is I'm going to move some things around so it's just a little bit easier for me to navigate and everything. All right, let's start from scratch. So the version you have available right now is going to be this one. That's the organizational store. Yeah, this one. So you have two different types of fields in the combo and the combo bar visual. Remember, the setup is exactly the same. The main difference is the orientation, whether it's columns or bars. So the setup is quite simple. You have two different types of fields. You have the category, which is the field that allows you to define the hierarchy of different categories. So that typically is textual information. For example, I could go for something like country on the first level and city on the second layer. And as far as the series goes, you have 25 of them. And that is what actually makes us a little bit different from the native visuals. So with the native visuals, you have to choose which values are on the columns, which ones are on the lines if you're using a combinational chart. And then you have to kind of try to accommodate those cases. What we try to do here is we try to give you the opportunity as a developer to specifically define what happens with each individual value. So for example, if I add just one of them, let's say total sales, and of course something is going to go wrong with the visual, because why not, since it's a live session. There we go. We got to get out of these situations somehow, right? So there you go. Country, city, and total sales. That is the only thing you need to create a combo chart. Now, the way it works is this is the hierarchy that you have created. So for example, if I click on Austria, I go down to the city level. What's also good about this is for those of you who have been here for a little bit longer, you probably have already noticed. For those of you who haven't, one of the things that we're true believers of is the fact that the visuals should always communicate information across the whole report page. And this is why any interaction that you do with the visual actually passes out a filter. So for example, if I, let's say, choose a different one. Now, let's say Sweden. I choose Sweden, you can see I did the drill down, and that automatically also filters out the other visuals on the report page. And because of the way on how we have created the visuals, one of the good things is if I create another combo chart right here, and let's say go by purchase type and the total sales, without holding control, right? So one hand on the mouse, the other one's right here. I simply choose, for example, Malmo, that's the city, and I then click on in-store. Without holding control or anything, I do the cross-filtering. So this is a lot more intuitive to the users than always have to remember to hold down the control that's with the native visuals, right? I'm not saying that it's a bad experience. I'm just saying that this is a bit more efficient. So your users don't have to have that prior knowledge. They can simply interact with the visuals and get to the results a lot faster. So once we're done with the very basics of the visual, so we created the visual, we have two different categories. Adding a new level is as simple as in the native visuals, same principle, just drag it in. Now I'm going down to the product name, and then I can go down to the city, right? Just pick and drop whatever you need and adjust the hierarchy. That's no issue whatsoever. Now, something that is a little bit different with the current version, and I want to emphasize on this, with the current version that's available on the app stores, you're going to notice that we do not have a legends field. So with the current version, what we had to do is we had to specifically define, for example, if I would want to have a total sales for each of the, we had channels, right? Let's say genders, male or female, right? I think we had to, yeah, male or female. So if I would want to split this total sales into two different columns, I would have to create two calculations, one for male, one for female, and then have two different series. Now, what I wanted to showcase to you guys as well is that we actually have already, so if I type in timeline, so we have released 3 already visuals with the legends field. That's going to be the timeline, the combo, and the combo bar. So if we go to the timeline page right here, you can see that the version that's in the app source is 1.11.8. But if we look at the visual that's physically in the report, you can see that the app source version is 1.11.4. So the reason why you have this discrepancy is because the visual has been already submitted to app source. It has been already verified by the Microsoft team. Now it's just in the process of getting updated to the live environment. So very soon, usually it's about 5 to 10 business days, you're gonna have a new version for timeline, combo, and combo bar. And the main difference between these visuals is that we're gonna have a legends field. So what the legends field really allows us to do is, you're gonna have this one right here, right? You noticed this with the native visuals, right? Native visuals already had this. The reason why it took us so long is because we wanted to take it a step further. So what we did with it is, for example, add right here, you've seen this before, right? There's nothing super unique about it. But what we did here to make it a little bit more interesting is if we go to the formatting options, you now have the possibility to customize either all series together or independently, like I said. If I'm customizing all series together, you can see that I can choose whether or not I'm splitting that series by legend. So this is for all, for example, if I want to split it or not. But what's interesting about this is you now have this approach. Let's say I want to go for, let's say quantity. And the quantity is very low, you can see. And it automatically also splits. I could go right here, Series 2 configuration, enable customize this series, and disable the split by legend. So with the new upcoming version of the visual, you're gonna be able to physically choose which series are being split by the legends field and which are not. What's even better about this is you're now in full control over also all the possible combinations of the charts. So for example, I can say that, okay, now this actually becomes a line. You don't really see the line. Well, I'm gonna put it on the secondary axis. It's right here. I'm gonna change the color of it so it's a little bit more noticeable. I'm gonna increase the width of it so it's even more prominent. I'm gonna add the markers and everything. So to make it even more visible, right? But the great approach of this is that at any given time, if I'm looking at this like, but I actually want to see the split based on the legend field, simply enable split by legend, and you have two different series coming in. We're also always trying to track the name of the legend category itself. So you can see that, for example, the female category and the male category, whether it's a line or it's a column, it's always going to try to follow the logic. Sure, there might be some edge cases. There still might be some use cases where this doesn't fully work. Okay, we're fine by it. Tell us about it. Let us improve upon it, and let's make the best visuals that are out there, right? That's the main goal about it. So this is just a quick look into what's coming with the new versions. Can you have the dummy data set? This is the same data set that you're actually using for the challenge. It's the same data set that you're using for that. I'm using that one to play around with it. Now, as far as the combo goes as well, like I mentioned, you have the full capability of choosing how you want to split things up. So I'm going to switch back to the one that you have currently available just to avoid any confusions. So at any point of time, like I said, you could choose, for example, that you want to create a stack or you want to cluster them. You can do this in two different ways. You can either define this by adjusting the series defaults, which means that you're adjusting all series altogether, or If you want to just stack two of them, let's say I have right here sum of quantity, and I'm going to add the same thing once more. For a specific reason, I want to go back to column as well. So you can see we have these two little columns, and I'm going to adjust it to primary axis, so these two little ones. And let's say I want to stack these two. I'm actually going to get a little bit closer so that these ones are a little bit bigger. There we go. And I'm going to also, just for the purpose of testing, define that the max range is going to be something like 50K. There we go. It's not the greatest possible option right now, but this is just to showcase the capabilities. So the yellow column shows us the total sales. These two show us the sum of quantity 2 times. Now, if I wanted to create, let's say, the column for total sales as is, but I want to stack these two, I can't really use the series default, right? You're wrong about it. You can actually use it, but you have to think about the further setup of the series. So for example, if I say that all of them are stacked, and now go back to the primary axis and give you the full view, you can see that they're right here at the top. But this is not what I wanted, right? I wanted to have the quantity next to the chart. So what I can do is I could go, for example, a different approach. I can say, okay, go back to clustering. But then these two are right next to each other. I want them on top of another. I go to, for example, series 3, enable customize this series, find a setting that's called stack, and this one is going to have the respective stack number. Every single series is going to have their respective stack number by default, meaning that series 1 is stack 1, series 2 is stack 2, series 3 is stack 3, and so forth. In order to stack them on a single stack, probably guessed it right, you need to make sure that these numbers correlate to the other series that you want to stack. For example, right here, I'm using stack 2 because series 2 is the first sum of quantity. So now, if I give you the limit again of the value of 50K so we can see it a little bit closer, you can see they're right here on top of another. If I go back to series 3 and put it back to stack 3, they're right next to each other, but I can say that I want to stack it on top of another. So this gives you the great opportunity to, if you have, for example, variations where you want to have regular columns and you want to add a line on top of it, but you actually also want to have a stacked column chart next to it, you have all these amazing options. And this is one of the reasons why when it comes to, let's say, ZoomCharts visuals, especially the combo or the timeline visual, actually it kind of goes around to all of them, is we want to give you the flexibility. Flexibility doesn't always come with the easiest formatting options. I get that. We're trying to improve upon that. But the one thing you have to always remember is you can't have flexibility and ease of use at the same time. Something has to be a little bit sacrificed. We're trying to find new ways on how to improve upon it, right? But for now, we're going for the flexibility part. So the combo chart, like I said, has more than 100 different variations of charts that you can create. All of it is achieved through the formatting options. The stacking, the clustering, and you can see already the chart types, 25 different series. This is the reason why there are so many options. Multiple stacks, multiple clusters, lines, areas going all around, so you can create the chart that you're actually looking for. You can also create things like Dumbbell charts, box and whiskers, candlesticks, bullet charts. There's a lot of different options that you can do here. It all just comes back down to the fact that how you want to showcase your data and does it correctly tell a story. Because remember, not necessarily the most complex visual is the best visual that's you could have used for this particular use case. The visual's main purpose is to tell a story. If it doesn't tell a story, probably not the best use case of a visual. Simple as that. So you have the ability to play around with them. What else is there? Let's go for something simpler. Let's go for the same combo chart. Now let's say I want to go for country, total sales, very basic chart, right? And let's say city is going to be my second level. Same as before, but just single series. No other formatting option has been applied. This is a completely brand new chart. Now, I want to have something like an average value. In order to do that, you simply go to the formatting options, find the thresholds, enable it, choose whether you want to showcase it as a line or an area. So area means that you're probably going to have a starting and end position, whereas a line is going to have one specific value. And instead of constant, I'm going to choose average. Once you choose another aggregation instead of constant, you have to choose based on which series is the value going to be created. So for example, if you have something like total sales and then you have quantity and you want to see the average quantity, you need to make sure that underneath the thresholds, you would select series 1 or 2. So just something to remember. Okay, so now I have a red line. Great. What the hell is that red line, right? There's no explanation for it. There's just a random line showcasing it there. Well, let's improve upon it. Let's take the line color itself, make it black, decrease the transparency, increase the opacity, increase the line width so it's just more prominent, and enable the label. The label by default is always going to be positioned in the top left corner. But knowing how most charts are made, you usually have a downfall going to the bottom right corner, right? So in most cases, you're creating descending charts. In other cases, not. So always adapt this to your scenario. The reason why I'm saying this is because you're probably going to agree with me that this is not very readable because it's on top of a chart, on top of a column that's just some background on top of it. I just want to make it more cleaner. You can easily do that. So first of all, I'm going to define what is this line. And I'm going to say that this is the average sales. All right, cool. Go a little bit lower, and I'm going to change the font color to white, background to black, and the background opacity back to 100. Like I said, now it's a little bit easier to see, but it feels like it's in front of the chart again, like in front of the columns, right? So scroll down and just find the horizontal position and say it's going to be on the right side. So what's good about this is that let's actually go into the focus mode. Decrease the size of these so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see. So you can see, I hope you can see, the average sales is 3.54 million now. The way that this is getting calculated is not based on the whole data set that you have available, but based upon the current visible viewport, meaning that the currently visible categories. So for example, if I move the chart to the right and see here, when I get over the middle point of Netherlands, if I move it and get away from Netherlands, see, it recalculates itself. That is because at that point, the data point itself gets omitted. So it's not in the calculation anymore. So if I choose one particular country and go down to the city level, you can see this gets recalculated. I move the chart, for example, to the right, only to these two, I can get the average for that. So these thresholds always follow whatever action you do, and they do get recalculated based upon the visible data. If you would want to have something that showcases you let's say the average across the whole platform, you could have another series that references it, or you could have something like a card where there's other options on how to do that. This is just something I wanted to quickly showcase because it's a small little thing, but it can easily enhance the visual even more. Now, what else is there? If we play around with the toolbar items, and this is one of my favorites, right? It's the smallest little thing, but it gives you a lot of power. And that is the reset button. So for those of you who know, great. For those of you who don't know, under toolbars, we have a reset button. What does the reset button do? The reset button clears the filters from the visual. And you're like, wow, that sounds amazing, right? We have bookmarks, we have reset slicers. Why do we need another reset button within a visual? Simple. Let's say I have two different visuals. I'm going to go with something like a donut chart right next to it. The arch nemesis of a lot of people. I like it. If you use the donut chart correctly, it's not a bad visual. It's all about the usage. So let's say I want to go for gender distribution. There we go. So if I go to toolbar and also enable the reset, you can see that I just enabled it, but there's nothing that references reset. That is because the way when we have built the reset button is it only showcases itself if you have filters applied, meaning that as soon as I select one of the countries and go down to the cities, you can see the reset appears. If I select one of the slices, the reset appears. If I don't have anything selected, for example, I just unselected, you can see reset clears off. This is and the reason why I said that this is a small little thing, but it gives you a lot of power, is because it essentially does two things. One, it allows you to clear the filters from any given visuals, but specifically for that visual. For example, I click here, I remove the filter for the country, but you can see the gender is still here. So this allows you, because with bookmarks, you typically reset all. And that's a great use case. We usually recommend to use that as well in every single report, just to give you a quick way on how to get to the very top. But having the reset buttons gives your users the possibility to actually work with the visuals and eliminate those filters that at one point you're like, okay, I kind of forgot where I am, right? So I can just reset and go back again, but for this specific visual. And this is why you enable it. It gets you back to the beginning of the story for that specific visual without attacking or taking anything away from any other visual. It's very simple, efficient, and I think it's very well worth the name of reset button and one of the coolest features we have. It's my opinion. I just love it. All right. What else? You can, of course, play around with the different settings of the y-axis. You can increase, like you already saw me doing here. You can define the custom value ranges. You can adjust the scale adjustment tolerance setting. The name is a mouthful, I know, but the main thing it does is essentially how much of a percentage of a total value you're leaving at the top. So for example, if I go to toolbars and set it outside, you can see there's a little bit of white space at the top. That's the threshold that I'm using for this scale tolerance. So 0.3 means 30%. If I decrease it to something like 0.1, you can see it goes more to the top. The main reason for this is we want to make sure that you adjust the visual how much you want to. And if you want to save the space, because if you put the toolbar outside, it takes more space. If you put it inside, within the chart, you can see now it's very close right here. And if I would have labels, these would be starting to overlap. That's the reason why you can adjust the tolerances and move the bars closer or further away from the maximum of the Y or X axis, depending on the visual. So that sort of stuff. What else? X axis. Play around with the labels itself, the orientation of them, and so forth, whether or not you're wrapping the labels, just a bunch of different other stuff. Fill color settings. You can also add gradients on the columns. And you can also choose the gradient direction. So for example, you want to see how much over the top have you achieved above the average, let's say like that. So you would go with the reverse behavior. So you would color the bars, for example, in red, but then the gradient color would be green. Oh no, actually in reverse. The column would be green, the gradient would be red. That sort of stuff. You can define the starting position. So I can say starting from 90%, so it's from the bottom here. Starting from 10%, almost at the top. So you can play around with a lot of these visual things. The one thing to always remember though is, although it might look cool, again, the main thing is the visual needs to tell a story. If it's confusing to the user, it's not a good visual. You need to come back to it and make adjustments to it. Don't get too attached to the visuals that you're creating or the reports that you're creating. Things are going to change. It's only natural, and you're going to have to be doing that. Trust me. That's one of the biggest mistakes I did when I started off. I got too caught up with my work, right? Every single report I created was like a child of mine, right? I created that. I know everything. It's very good. It's very usable and so forth. But then you give it to the user and they're like, what the hell is this? I don't know how to use this. I can't read this. I don't understand these things. The user is the one that defines the rules for it. You as a developer can give him suggestions or options on which one to go with, but the report needs to help the user, not you, the developer. So after time, I got just used to the fact that what I'm doing is best of my abilities for every single report, but all of them are going to change eventually. There's nothing you can do about it, trust me. One day Microsoft decides to release a new feature, because I can bet it that for those of you who have already started to create reports for your organization and you've been doing this for a couple of years, let's say, once Microsoft released the new cards with the reference labels and everything, how many of you were thinking, it would have saved me so much time on the previous reports? It's ridiculous. Because previously you would have to create multiple cards, then you had a visual at the very, like at the background of it, then you had the up and down arrows going, for example, with a table or something like that. There's just a bunch of different things. Like this is one of the examples. Let me give you. Let's open up here. Just to kind of give you a glimpse of how things have evolved already, right? Report examples. This one. If anybody wants to open it up afterwards, there's the link. So right here at the top, for those of you who know already the new cards, this kind of looks like what they achieved, right? But in order for me to do this, for when I was creating the report, I think it was a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, something like that. So in reality, what's here, what you don't see is there's a card visual, there's a card, another visual, which gives you the text. You can also use a text box for it. And this is a table. A table which gives you a specific line of text, a table which gives you the value that you're looking for in comparison, and the icon from the conditional formatting, whether it's the up or down button and based on the color scheme that we had here going. Now, it's all within the card visual itself. So things do change, and you gotta get used to it. So for the combo chart, if you guys have any questions, if there's any specific use case that you want me to try to tackle whilst we're here, drop me a question in the Q&A section, remember, so it's easier for me to follow through. Other than that, let's move on to some other visuals. For example, like I said, one of the arch nemesis of data visualization, right? A lot of people hate it, a lot of people love it, there's no in between, is the donut and the pie chart. The donut and the pie chart are good visuals if you use them correctly. If you oversaturate them, of course, they become god-awful visuals. For example, if you go for something like product name, remove, let's say, also the others. So even having a chart like this, it's a no. You have too many slices. It's really impossible to compare them to each other, even though they're already kind of created in a way that based on the value in the descending order, it's really hard to understand what's really showcased here, right? Switching this into a combo visual would probably be a better approach and a lot more easier to understand. This is why you need to understand what visuals are used for what use cases. Back to the donut chart. So let's go for something like city, with the same data again, the country and the city. Let's go for country and purchase type. So one of the pitfalls also of the donut chart or the pie chart is that it's a visual where you have the drill down, but it's very hard to follow the story. And this is one of the things that we wanted to tackle when we created our donut charts. So whenever you do a drill down, the first thing that we do here is I'm going to go into the focus mode, adjust the size of the visual again so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see. And let's start to play around with it. So, for example, if I go and open up Sweden, what happens is the previous layer, the first layer, gets actually decreased in size a little bit and placed in the middle. So that creates so-called inner reference layers for the donut and the pie chart. The reason why we're creating these is because it captures the position, the size, the color of the slice that you previously selected. That's one thing. And the other thing, it captures the level. So for example, right now it's the first level, right? Quite simple. And if you hover over it, wherever I hover over it, you can see it showcases the same tools, Sweden, the value, and the percentage value for it. So what we were trying to achieve with these visuals and what you can do as well, and why we encourage you to, if you use donut charts, try to use multiple layers, right? Is because it allows the users to tell the story. You can simply click on one of the countries, that drills down to the second layer, and on the second layer, I can choose one per specific, for example, market order. In this case, it was the purchase type. You do that, you create a selection, and the user understands what has been selected previously. Because one thing you have to remember is let's say the habits of users nowadays. The attention span of a user has decreased drastically. And in reality, let's be honest, the phone rings, somebody yells in the background, something happens in the background, you get distracted for a couple of seconds. Somebody has done a few drill downs, you come back to the screen, you're like, okay, we see another slide maybe. I don't know what really happened here. So this is what we tried to eliminate. We wanted to give you the possibility to see the whole system of how you got here. This is the same principle that we're also trying to implement within the combo chart, but it's still something that we're working on. So for example, if I add more levels here, let's say the product type. So country, product type, purchase type. Click on Germany, you can see that's the color and the position of the slice. If I choose the product type, you can see now I have two inner levels, and you're essentially creating that map for the user. So even though he wasn't there when you did the drill downs, he can come back to the screen and see, okay, I have to choose the blue slice, then I have to choose the orange slice, and I'm going to get back to this result. This is to help you with the data-driven story. So they can easily understand what is where, and how I work with it. The other thing we did here is, most of you probably already noticed this, is we do have the interactive and I'd say very cool looking other slice. So when I first enable it, you can see, well, nothing really happens. Great feature, guys, right? Kudos to you. That is because the number of slices has been set to 15. So the way that the others works is you define the group size. And if I say, for example, 3, you can see that 3 slices are visible and the rest of them are grouped into the others. Now you could do this also with the native visuals, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But the difference is that this other slice is actually an interactive slice. So if I click on it, that opens up the next 3 contributors. If I click on it next time, you can see now it showcases 4 because there's no reason to create an others group for one slice, right? So there is logic behind it. But essentially, the reason why we're doing this is because, again, going back to the user habits, the attention span. If I showcase to you all of these colors, tell me truthfully, how many of you were looking at the brighter colors first, right? It's not even the case that, I did it accidentally. I did it on purpose in this case, just to showcase it that whenever I enable it, you don't have those colors there. It's gray. There's a reason why it's grayed out. It's a neutral color, and you can focus on what's important in front of you, rather than look at all the other slices that are out there, which is not the topic of discussion right now. Simple, again, yet efficient. And this is why it's so important to understand the user habits that they have, the colors, the associations that they have with things, and so forth. Because the visuals are there to help you out visualize it, right? And you do this by using different features, different customization options, and so forth. Like, for example, if you enable others, and let's see how many we had here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I hope it was 10. If it wasn't, I'm gonna fail, and it is what it is. You can't always win. Sorry for that. There we go. So I have enabled the others. I have set the number of slices to be on 5. And you can see that others is the name that's set by default. That's the encoded value. But in the formatting options, you have others and previous label. So to help the user, I could say that, well, others is actually bottom 5, and the previous is top 5. So that now the user understands that instead of just others, it's the bottom 5. If I open up the bottom 5, it says, well, now it's the top 5. And if you look at the chart, there's 100% a question in your mind is, why is 61% smaller than 8%? That's because there's different sizing mechanisms. And the default one that we use allows you to focus on the small slices as well. So for example, if we switch it back to 3, you can see that comparing these slices in comparison is a lot easier than if I would have them in actual sizes. So there are specific use cases where you want to use that. If that is not the case and you're like, yeah, but I really need it to be the actual size. Sure, not a problem. Donut, others and previous sizing, and switch it to actual. Simple as that. You're also going to notice a different behavior that if I go to 3 slices, that instead of relatively scaling them, I'm actually positioning them exactly where they're supposed to be. Okay. So we had a question I missed, thanks to the team. Jasmine was asking, hey, this looks great. I was wondering if it is able to build a tackle chart that is connected to a field parameter. A counter question to you, Jasmine. Are you willing to use the field parameters as the value, the legend, or the x-axis? It depends on that. But in theory, it should be supporting all of those cases. If not, it's probably a limitation that we are working on resolving. But if you have a specific use case, tell me about it, and I'll be able to test it and then get back to you about it. All right, so the donut chart. What else? One of the things that we have talked about a lot is the colors, right? And this is what I also told you guys here. Everybody's going to pay attention to the specific color that you're showcasing, right? The bright colors, the more noticeable colors, and so forth. So one of the things that is also a common practice in data visualization is that whenever you are talking about a specific value that you're showcasing within the charts, you try to keep the colors similar. For example, if I'm looking at total sales right here, instead of creating a rainbow chart right here, I can go to the fill color settings. And where's the fill mode? I can keep it on solid fill. I can add it a bit of shadow on top of it and so forth. But I can choose the base fill color. And what that does is creates a donut based on the original color. So it's a lot simpler for the user to understand, okay, this is talking about the sales, this is talking about the sales as well. If it would be something else, for example, I switch to quantity, then I also change the base fill color to something else. Allow the user to create association with the colors for easier reference in use. You have the ability to do that. I want to change the column means like, so the value for the columns switching between revenue and profit. We can quickly test it out. So let's go with something very basic. All right, modeling, new parameter fields, total sales, total quantity, and a slicer. Where's my parameter? Placed in series 1. There we go. Now it's quantity. Now it's sales. Was that the one that you were looking for? Meanwhile, what else? The map visual. I know we have some data regarding the maps. So regarding the maps, remember, our visual requires you to have a longitude and latitude. It is not rocket science, especially if you're going on a high level. I simply created 2 new columns, latitude and longitude. I typed in the name of the country in Google with the added names of longitude and latitude and just took the coordinates for it. Once I have that, I can simply go to the countries and say latitude, longitude. That is the map visual created. I use the total sales as the value. There you go. And what you probably noticed in a lot of our examples is we do have pie charts around it. The way you enable the pie charts around the map itself is actually by using so-called categories. So for example, let's say the same gender. Okay, we were working with gender as well. Customer age, there's going to be a lot of values. Product type, we used it a little bit less. So use it here. You can see there's still no pie chart. Why? Because you have to go into the formatting options, node settings, and you have to enable pie charts on nodes. If you can enable pie charts on nodes, but not have a category, what this represents is the number of each slice represents a node underneath the cluster. So for example, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes in this cluster. If I convert this into a table, this is what I usually recommend people to do. Just have a raw data source right next to you, so you can see what happens with the data. And if I click on one of the slices, you can see that filters out this one. And if I give also it a name, so that's the Netherlands, that's Germany, and so forth. So just you have some reference and understand what's happening really there. But yeah, adding the category allows you to have the donut chart. You can play around with the distances of clustering. You can also define where all the nodes are specifically meant to split into individual nodes, where you can use the images. So for example, we have an image URL. Use the image here, node settings, and say, oh yeah, the cool thing. How the hell am I supposed to know what zoom level is what? Go under toolbar, enable zoom numbers. Once you're done with the report, you can disable this, but when you're developing, it's a lifesaver, trust me. So on level 5, I want it to be disabled. So level 5, it's still there. After level 5, it splits into individual nodes. And because I have different categories, I'm going to remove that for now. You can see that I split into individual nodes. So there's a lot of different things that you can kind of play around with and see how it interacts with the visual and so forth. What else? From the reports that I've already seen, some of you have used the lasso tool. Now with the lasso tool, there's one thing to always be cautious about. For example, if I go around here, you can see this is where the cluster is showcasing itself, right? And I'm going to create a custom polygon. Just means a custom shape. And if I select it, you can see only 2 countries get selected, yet the donut chart showcases 4 different countries. Why is that? Simple. The selection for the custom shape is done by the lasso tool boundaries. And if I get closer to the map, you can see that there's only 2 different countries within the boundaries. Everything else is outside. So you have to be cautious about drawing the areas. You need to double check and make sure that what you have drawn is actually what you are trying to filter out. Oh, in order for stacks. Got it, Jasmine. Sorry for that. So if we're using the parameter and if we're using the new legend version, this one works. What else? So how many drill down? We have some questions. So how many drill down layers would you suggest a maximum for donut chart? My personal recommendation is don't go beyond 3 or 4 levels. That is too deep of a specific information you're trying to find there. At that point, I would probably recommend to split into 2 different donut charts so the user can cross filter. Otherwise, you're limiting him. Think about it as a funnel, right? With every single click, you're going in a more narrow and narrow and narrow and narrow approach. So give him a chance to figure out how he wants to do things. I'm struggling with the visual for this challenge. Could you please share an example of drill down time series to Timeline Pro? Sure. Let's go create a new page. Timeline. So the timeline needs the date hierarchy and the date itself. Total sales, date. Oh, there we go. But the tricky thing about this is that we have splits in the data, right? So the one thing you have to remember about the time series and the timeline visuals is they're very strict visuals and they're always going to follow a calendar year. Just because you don't have any data is no reason for the visual to omit the data. It's still there, you just don't have any respective data for it. And the reason for this is because the visual that we created for time-based data exploration has unique interaction options. So for example, you can do things like that. I can hover over the x-axis and create a selection just by dragging on it. I can expand upon the selection and so forth. And if I click on that selection, that's going to drill down into that selection. And I can do this multiple times. These 3 go down. This month, well, in this case, there we go, this month. If I go back to the previous level and say, okay, these 2 months, well, it's going to go down to the daily level in 2 months. So you have to have continuality here. So if you're splitting and going into separate aggregate time units, then I would recommend you to have a look at the combo chart. When it comes to time series and timeline, before we sign off, because I see the time is starting to run out, I do want you to guys remember about, and just remind you guys about the resources of the Academy. Academy.zoomcharts.com. I'm going to quickly open it up. And for example, if you want to learn something more about, let's say, what's our favorites, the Timeline Pro, we have some starting videos now. So quick start guide is where I explain how to use the visual, how to set it up, what needs to be taken into consideration on the data setup side, specifically a video for it. Different hierarchies, different units, how to create it, and so forth. So all of it is there. Before we sign off as well, I'm going to beg for all of you, as always, please fill in your feedback in the feedback form. I'm going to post it again in the chat. So tell us if you liked it, if you didn't like it, what you liked it, what you disliked about it, what you want to hear more about. We're going to try to accommodate those cases and create the best possible kind of learning environment that there is. Other than that, I managed to answer all the questions, I think. Well, I'm happy for you, Tanya. I was about to ask, my favorite question for always at the end of the session is, did you guys manage to learn something new and useful? Because remember, learning something new is very simple. I could say something very ridiculous, like, I don't know, my height is 20 centimeters. You learn something new. Was it useful? Probably not. So if you manage to learn something new and useful, then my job here is done. And that is what I'm always trying to do with these sessions and what the team is all about. We want to give you an opportunity to get as much information as possible for how to set it up, how to use the visuals, how to use Power BI, and so forth. Other than that, if we don't have any questions, I thank every single one of you for your time, patience, and spending your time here, because your time is also one of the most, let's say, expensive resources that there is. So thank you for being here. I hope you managed to learn something even useful. I hope it actually gave you some insights on what you can do with the reports even more now, or how to use the visuals even more. Don't forget about the cheat sheet. And if you have any questions, webinars@zoomcharts.com. Send us your messages and we'll get back to you.